Never play a hero in Dungeons and Dragons if you're not ready to actually be one. So there is this thing that happens in Dungeons and Dragons campaigns. You create a character, you give them a backstory, maybe they're noble or brave or whatever, but at the end of the day, it is just a game, right? You roll some dice, you fight some monsters, everyone goes home happy. Except sometimes it is not like that. Sometimes a campaign comes along that changes everything, and this is the story of how one player made a choice that left an entire table sitting in complete silence. This whole thing started when our dungeon master, let's just call him the DM, finished watching this series called Exandria, Unlimited Calamity. Now, if you don't know what that is, it is basically a dungeon and dragons show where everything goes horribly wrong. We're talking about the fall of an entire civilization kind of wrong. Flying cities crashing down. Magic user splaying God, the whole 9 yards. And our DM, he got inspired, real inspired. He gathered up 7 of us, including me, and pitched this idea. A mini campaign set in a flying city. Not just any flying city though. This place was run by arrogant magic users who thought they were basically gods. The kind of people who look down on everyone else, literally and figuratively, because their entire city floats in the sky. Yeah, we all knew this was going to end badly. That is the whole point of these calamity-style games. But none of us knew just how badly. So let me introduce you to our group, because these characters are important to understanding what happened. First up, we had a green dragonborn rogue. This guy was the city's spy master. You know, the type who knows everyone's secrets, has eyes everywhere, deals in information like currency. His subclass was Arcane Trickster, which meant he mixed magic with his sneaky business. Then, there was this tabaxi rogue/fighter. Picture a cat person who smuggled illegal goods for the nobility. Whatever arc addiction these rich people had, he supplied it. He was a mastermind rune knight, which is a wild combination if you think about it. We also had an orc wizard, transmutation school, who was actually the face of one of the ruling orders of the city. So basically one of the big shots who ran everything. An orc wizard in a position of power, which was already interesting. There was an Azima cleric/paladin, life and crown subclasses. Pretty much your standard soldier type. The lawful good guy who follows orders and protects people. Nothing fancy, just reliable. Then, we had a lizardfolk sorcerer with the aberrant mind subclass. This character worked as the bloody shadow of one of the ruling orders. When someone needed to disappear quietly, this was the person who made it happen. Next was a Hex Blood Ranger/rogue, Gloomstalker, and Mastermind subclasses. She had clawed her way up from nothing to become the lady of the market. Basically, controlled all trade and commerce in the city. And finally, there was my character, a half-elf druid/paladin, moon, and ancient subclasses. I was playing a renowned hero, someone people looked up to, someone with a reputation. The kind of person who gets invited to important events because having them there makes everything look legitimate. Now here is where the relationships get interesting, because our DM didn't just throw us together randomly. He gave us connections, history, reasons to know each other. The Dragonborn Spy Master and the Lizardfolk Assassin. They were already working together. Their whole job was shutting down any rebellion against the ruling orders. They'd done dozens of operations together before the campaign even started. They were a team, efficient and cold. The Orc Wizard's order was chosen to organize and run the anniversary celebration. See, this flying city had an anniversary of when it first took to the skies, and it was a huge deal. Massive festival. Everyone celebrates. Very prestigious to be in charge of it. The Tabaxi smuggler and the Hex Blood Market lady. Oh man, they were a divorced couple, forced to work together to gather all the supplies for this anniversary festival. Can you imagine that awkwardness? Your ex-spouse, and you have to cooperate on this huge project where failure isn't an option. And the Azima soldier, he got assigned as my escort and bodyguard for the event. Because apparently renowned heroes need protecting, or maybe the ruling orders just wanted to keep an eye on me. So the campaign started the way these things usually do. We all officially met at one of the pre-parties. You know how it is. There is always parties before the main event, where people drink fancy wine and pretend to like each other while secretly scheming. Shenanigans happened. That is just what occurs when you put 7-player characters in the same room. We started forming our group, trying to figure out what was actually going on beneath all the celebration and fancy dresses and political nonsense. And what we found, it was bad. The system was corrupt, like really corrupt. Not surprising given that arrogant magic users were running everything, but the extent of it was shocking. The common people weren't just being ignored or mistreated. They were being treated like they were less than dirt, like they weren't even human, or orc, or elf, or whatever. But here is the thing about treating people like garbage for long enough. Eventually, someone snaps. We discovered that one of the common folk had finally had enough. This person was so desperate, so angry, so done with everything, that they decided to do something unthinkable. They were summoning an elder evil into the world. Now, if you're not familiar with D&D, elder evils are not like regular monsters. These are cosmic level threats, the kind of entities that can end civilizations, corrupt reality itself, turn the world inside out. This isn't fighting a dragon or a demon. This is fighting something that exists outside the normal rules of existence. And someone was bringing one into our flying city, filled with thousands of people. We had to stop it, obviously. That is what adventurers do, right? We found out about the threat, we investigated, we tracked down the source, and we confronted it. The fight happened. I won't go into all the details of the combat, because that is not really what this story is about. But picture this, reality tearing apart. Creatures spilling through from whatever nightmare dimension this elder evil called home, the entire city shaking and breaking apart. Magic going wild. We managed to stop the elder evil from fully entering the world. We saved everyone from complete annihilation. Except we didn't. Not really, because stopping the elder evil came at a cost. The city itself was destroyed in the process. This massive flying metropolis that had floated in the skies for who knows how many years. It was falling, crashing down. And all those creatures that had spilled out from wherever the elder evil was, they were still there, running wild through the streets, killing anyone they could find. The ruling orders, the arrogant magic users who ran everything. Most of them were dead. The nobles, dead. The fancy estates and towers, crumbling. We gathered up everyone who was still alive. And we made a point of focusing on the common people, not the high nobility. The ones who had been treated like dirt were the ones we were trying to save now. But here is where panic set in. The city was falling. We had maybe minutes before it hit the ground. We had hundreds, maybe thousands of people who needed to get to safety. And we were just 7 adventurers with limited resources, and even more limited time. The group started panicking in character. Everyone was shouting ideas, trying to figure out what to do, how to save everyone, whether it was even possible. The DM was describing the city shaking, buildings collapsing, people screaming, and then I spoke up. I got an idea. My voice was cold, strangely calm. Everyone at the table looked at me because the shift in tone was so sudden, so different from the panic everyone else was feeling. See, my character had something that nobody else had. 4 elder elementals in my service. These weren't just regular elementals you summon for an hour. These were powerful entities that I had bound to me, that followed my commands. But they didn't have names. In a lot of magical traditions, names have power. These elementals were serving me, but they hadn't earned their true names yet. They were bound, but not fully recognized, as individuals. I told them, right there, that once this was over, once everyone was safe, they would earn their names. They would get their freedom, their identity, their personhood. Then, I laid out the plan. The earth elemental and the water elemental would go down to the ground first. Earth would shape the terrain, create a safe landing zone, stable ground in whatever area we were crashing toward. Water would soften the impact, create barriers, protect the space. The air elemental would carry everyone down. We're talking about hundreds of people being lifted by one powerful entity and transported safely to the ground. The fire elemental would defend them on the way down. Because remember, there were still monsters loose in the city, and they weren't just going to let us evacuate peacefully. But here is the problem. How would the air elemental know where to go? How would it find the safe zone that earth and water were creating in all the chaos and smoke and destruction? My character had a magic spear, one that never missed its intended target. Never. That was its enchantment. So I would throw the spear toward the ground, toward where the safe zone needed to be. And the air elemental would grab onto it and follow it down. The spear would guide them. It would show them exactly where to go. The DM asked for the roll, the last roll of the entire mini-campaign. Everything came down to this one moment. I picked up the dice. Everyone was silent. You could hear people breathing. I rolled. The result came up just shy of failure. Like, just barely made it. The kind of roll where you succeed, but you know something went wrong. The DM described what happened. The plan worked. The earth and water elementals hit the ground and created a safe zone. The air elemental grabbed my spear and guided everyone down while the fire elemental fought off the monsters. People made it to the ground safely. The party started celebrating in character. Everyone survived. The people were safe. Against all odds, we actually pulled it off. And then the DM spoke. His exact words made the entire table go silent with anxiety. He looked at the player running the Hexblood and said her character's name. You look around seeing everyone safe and your friends with you. But then, like a quick stab to the gut, you realize, where is the half-elf nobody had noticed? In all the celebration, in all the relief of everyone making it to safety, nobody had checked where I was. The Hexblood's player relayed this thought to the rest of the party. Everyone started looking around, searching, calling out my character's name. And then they looked up. I was still in the city, still standing on the falling, crumbling ruins of what used to be a flying metropolis. And my character was celebrating because they made it. Because everyone else was safe, the city was surrounded by smoke from all the fires and destruction. Through that smoke, as it got thicker and the city fell further, they could barely see me. And just before the smoke completely blocked their vision, just before they lost sight of me forever, I gave them a wave. The DM could have ended it there. That would have been enough. But he didn't. He gave us one more scene, one last look at my character. Before the end, towers were falling all around. The dead were scattered everywhere, across the ground, over broken buildings, hanging out of shattered windows. Bodies were burning, structures were burning, everything was fire and smoke and ruin. My character just stood there for a moment, staring at the smoke where my friends had been visible just seconds ago. Then I turned around and started looking for a place to rest. I found a ruined square that looked good enough. There were broken stairs leading up to what used to be some important building. Probably. I sat down on those stairs. And then I found an erhu. My character had a skill in playing it. I'd written that into the backstory ages ago, just as a flavor detail, never thinking it would matter. I picked up the instrument and started playing. The DM let me have a monologue. My character talked about everything that had happened. About the city and its arrogance. About the people who had been saved. About the choice that had been made. About how sometimes being a hero means making sure others survive, even if you don't. And then the DM asked me a question. It was the question that had haunted the entire mini-campaign, the one that had been asked to different characters at different times throughout the story. Do you accept this fate? Throughout the campaign, other characters had been asked this question in different contexts, about accepting their roles in the corrupt system, about accepting the way things were, about choosing to maintain the status quo. Everyone else had said no. Every single other player, when confronted with that question in whatever form it took, had rejected it. I only had one answer, and it was the one everyone else hadn't chosen. I do. The table sat in complete silence after that. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The DM described the city finally hitting the ground, the impact, the destruction. My character sat there on those broken stairs, playing the erhu as everything fell apart. And that was it. That was the end of the campaign. Here is the thing about that moment that I think really got to everyone. It wasn't just about a character dying. Character death happens in D&D all the time. Sometimes it is dramatic. Sometimes it is stupid. Sometimes it is heroic. This was different because it was a choice. My character could have evacuated with everyone else, could have found a way down, used magic, called for help. The DM even gave me that out with a question. Do you accept this fate? Was basically asking, are you sure you want to do this? I could have said no. I could have had my character frantically search for another way down, have them try to survive. The DM would have worked with it. That is what DMs do. But my character was a renowned hero. That was their entire identity. They were someone people looked up to, someone who had a reputation for doing the right thing, for saving people. And in that moment, the heroic thing wasn't surviving. It was making sure everyone else did. It was using every resource available, including the elementals who had served faithfully and were finally getting their reward of names and freedom. It was throwing that spear, the one that never missed, to guide people to safety. The spear that never missed meant my character couldn't miss either, couldn't fail. But it also meant that spear was going to the ground. and my character was staying in the sky. I think what got to everyone was the calmness of it. My character wasn't panicking, wasn't scared. They were celebrating because everyone else made it. They were satisfied. They had accepted this fate, not with resignation or despair, but with peace. The image of my character sitting on those broken stairs, surrounded by death and fire, playing a haunting melody on an erhu while the city crashed down. That stuck with people. We talked about it for weeks after. The other players said they kept thinking about it. About that wave through the smoke. About how none of them had realized what was happening until it was too late to do anything. The Hexblood player especially, since their character was the one who noticed first, said it hit them like an actual gut punch. That moment of realization, of looking around and understanding that someone was missing, that they weren't coming back. The DM later told me that he'd had other plans if I'd said no to accepting that fate. There were ways he'd prepared for my character to survive. But he also said that the choice I made, the way it played out, was more impactful than anything he had planned, because it was real. It was a character being who they were supposed to be, following through on what they represented, even when it cost them everything. That is the thing about playing a hero in Dungeons and Dragons. Most of the time, it is fun. You save people, you fight monsters, you get rewards and praise. But sometimes, if you're really playing a hero, you have to make the hard choice. You have to look at a situation and ask yourself, what would a hero actually do here? And sometimes, the answer isn't the one you want. The campaign ended there, but the story kept going for us as players. We talked about what happened to the survivors, how they rebuilt, what they did with the second chance they'd been given. The common people who had been saved, they became the foundation of something new, something better than what had existed before. The arrogance and corruption of the old flying city died when it crashed. What came after was built by people who remembered what it was like to suffer, who had been given a chance by someone who sacrificed everything for them. The elder elementals got their names, they fulfilled their task, and earned their freedom and identity. The DM said they became protectors of the new settlement, watching over the people they had saved. The other player characters all survived and became leaders in different ways. The Dragonborn Spymaster used their skills to root out corruption instead of protecting it. The Tabaxi Smuggler started using their connections for legitimate trade. The Orc Wizard helped organize a new council that actually represented everyone, not just magic users. The Azima Soldier trained new guards who protected people instead of oppressing them. The Lizardfolk Sorcerer became a defender against external threats rather than an internal shadow. The Hex Blood Market, Lady-insured trade, was fair and accessible to everyone. They all changed because of what happened. Because they survived when someone else didn't. There is something about tabletop RPGs that you don't get in other forms of gaming or storytelling. The choices are real, not in the sense that they affect actual reality, but in the sense that they come from real people making real decisions about what their characters would do. I didn't choose for my character to stay behind because it was the optimal tactical decision. I didn't do it because the DM railroaded me into it. I did it because when I thought about who my character was, what they represented, what they believed in, there was no other choice they would have made. A renowned hero who had spent their entire life building a reputation, who had power and resources and respect, who had bound 4 elder elementals into service. That person doesn't abandon hundreds of people to maybe save themselves. They use everything they have to ensure everyone else makes it, even if it costs them everything. So yeah, never play a hero in D&D if you're not ready to actually be one, because sometimes the game asks you to prove it. Sometimes you're sitting at a table with your friends, rolling dice and pretending to be someone else, and suddenly it becomes very real. Not real in the sense of actual danger, but real in the sense of meaning something, of making a choice that shows who you want to be. Even in a fantasy game, the city fell, the hero stayed, the people survived, and everyone at that table learned something about stories, about sacrifice, about what it really means to be heroic. Sometimes, the best stories are the ones where nobody goes home happy, but everyone goes home changed. If you play D&D or any tabletop RPG, think about your character. Think about who they really are when the crisis comes, because eventually, in a good campaign, that crisis will come, and you'll have to answer that question. Do you accept this fate? Your answer matters, not just for your character, but for everyone at the table who is sharing that story with you. Make it count. Drop a comment if you've had to make such a choice, and if you're sitting there thinking about starting your own campaign, or you've been away from the table for too long. Let this be your sign. There is another story coming up about what happens when a DM forgets that their job is to make heroes, not break them. Until next time.